Jumping in video games is probably the most famous and well-recognized aspect of gameplay. Mario, arguably the most famous video game character of all time, jumps. Mario was once known as Jumpman. Jumping is endemic to video games. It's probably the most famous element of gameplay. The classic press A to jump. Everyone understands it. So, for me to say that Gunpoint has the best jumping mechanic out of any game I've played is a tall order. I've played hundreds of games, and under the purview of jumping, there's rocket jumping in TF2, or there's the first-person parkour in Mirror's Edge, and amongst indie games we have the absolutely excellent Super Meat Boy as well. And yet, Gunpoint beats them all out. In Gunpoint, you play as Richard Conway, and to jump, you hold down left click, aim, and then release to jump. It seems an odd and somewhat arduous amount of steps for a very simple mechanic that we all know has been done fantastically with just a single button. But the way this jump is implemented in Gunpoint is absolutely fantastic and, in my opinion, quintessentially indie. I have a certain fondness for indie games. I love that they engage in genres, ideas and styles of presentation that so-called AAA games won't touch. However, one thing they usually don't present any innovation in is gameplay. Arguably, the games that do represent minor new twists to existing gameplay styles, like Undertale, or indeed the game I'm praising here today, are only really combining multiple genres or styles of gameplay into one. Undertale combined traditional RPG and bullet hell mechanics to great effect, while Gunpoint combined 2D platformer and puzzler elements with a somewhat novel and really satisfying jump mechanic. No individual element is entirely new in Gunpoint's makeup, but what makes it such a great game is that the points of inspiration it draws upon are all largely, and unfortunately, untapped and underutilized. It's the quintessential indie game for me because of that. It draws upon and effectively uses the elements that most games don't. Visually, the game draws upon classic noir and detective movie visuals. The city in the background is permanently set at night. The streets are empty and the lampposts illuminate empty roads. Made up of muted blues, greys and off-whites, the backdrops of the game manage to inspire a particular mood, a mood very much akin to those found in the noir films I imagine the game takes inspiration from, although now set in a modern era. The music works extremely well with this mood. Smooth and jazzy bass lines, light percussion and vibraphones everywhere, the main soundtrack acts like you would expect. A jazzy backdrop for your sneaky shenanigans. I say main soundtrack because there is an alternate version of almost every song that seamlessly transitions in when you enter the cross-link interface, a soundtrack of colder and more electronic takes on the same tracks. I'll just stop talking for a sec so you can listen for yourself. Of course, the visuals and sounds are important, but they wouldn't work at all if they weren't supported by the gameplay and writing, and they very much are. You play as a freelance spy with a spiffing new pair of death-defying pants. Does that not already have you in love with the game? You are implicated in a murder and set out to clear your name, while taking jobs from different people all somehow involved in the murder. It's all a very silly setup if you want a serious narrative, but despite a consistently funny plot, with some very snappy dialogue, the game also surprises with a few darker moments, and as a whole the narrative celebrates the cheesy elements of noir and detective stories, as well as the interpersonal drama that can come from them. Finally, there is the gameplay. Mixing stealth, puzzle and twitch platform elements to allow for multiple playstyles that all feel equally satisfying. There's the fast-paced rush through levels that frequently necessitates violence, both lethal and non-lethal. Stealthy but slower gameplay, in which turning off the lights becomes a positively essential skill, and finally an approach much like solving a puzzle in which understanding and predicting guard behaviour are the main skills required. Different levels encourage different playstyles, and some can only be played in one way, but when things go wrong you frequently have to react dynamically, and that's when Gunpoint really shines. At its worst, Gunpoint is a really great stealth platformer with puzzle elements, but at its best, it's a sandbox for amazing moments, tense scenarios, and utter hilarity. In that respect, it reminds me a lot of the Metal Gear Solid series, a series that tends towards well-laid plans that inevitably go wrong, and the enjoyment that comes from the ensuing scramble, or the excitement of waiting under a truck until the alert phase ends. But with a tighter mechanical rule set that's more limited than Metal Gear Solid in dimensions or the amount of weapons available to the player. In fact, I'd say that Gunpoint takes inspiration from the Metal Gear Solid series and franchises similar to it in quite a few respects. The support for different styles of play is certainly one, while the writing and its ability to combine humour and dark or affecting moments reminds me a fair bit of Metal Gear Solid 3 in particular. You certainly don't walk away from encounters like you can in Metal Gear Solid though. One bullet and you're dead. So the game feels a lot like a stealth-oriented Hotline Miami, but with an even more forgiving save system. And what a save system it is. Rather than restarting the level from a defined checkpoint, or at the very beginning, it will present options to you from a selection of automatically generated saves, be they 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 8 seconds, or 10 seconds ago. If jumping back 2 seconds still leaves you in a dire situation, then try going back 5 seconds. Nope, maybe 10 then. If you can't finish from any of those saves, and that only happened to me once in the 11 or so hours I played the game, then you need to reset to the beginning of the level. I love this system for the playstyle it encourages. Risks and tricky maneuvers are all easy to enjoy without worry of a big setback, but you're still going to want to avoid anything outright dumb that will prevent your ability to finish the level. There's almost no punishment for dying, and that fits really well with the tone of the game, without making the game feel too easy. Here, the level as a whole is the challenge, not the tricky maneuvers within it. All in all, that's why I love Gunpoint so much. All of the elements of the game come together to form something fantastic, and I highly recommend anyone play it. It's a pretty short game at around 2.5 hours to finish, but there's a great deal of complexity and depth to it, and it's very replayable. So why do you play as whoever you play as? Do you play as yourself, or someone else? A better version of you, or worse version of yourself? Or just the most disgusting creation you can come up with in the character creation? Do you put yourself into the character, or do you try to play as a role, and a character entirely separate from you? A friend of mine who also preferred to play as a woman, given the choice, once justified his position